Pancakes. Oh, I blew it. I'm sorry.
You nut, get out of town.
I'm sorry.
Mystery Science Theater 3000 is a show that I hold very close to my heart. I think a good place to start you off is the bloopers, because I get to choose where to start you off. It's my video.
Joel, I hate movies where men wear shorter skirts than the women.
Why don't you know it? I can just imagine a common scene from the days of ancient Greece. Oh, hi. Oh, jeez. This is a bugaboo, this one.
Pants.
Sorry, he's okay. He's all right.
Joel, I hate movies where the women wear shorter or the men.
I love movies like that.
The show was originally from 1988 and it played until 1999, but my parents kept it playing in my household long enough for me to catch it as a tiny little child.
Well, sirs, we've all played miniature golf into the small hours, and it presents quite a few nagging questions.
Like, is it really golf?
No, it's not.
And is it really miniature?
Oh, not at all. It takes up a heck of a lot of space.
So yeah, it's a show I'm pretty fond of, but it's not one I would call my favorite. I would reserve that for something like An Idiot Abroad, or Better Call Saul, or Dairy Girls. It does its own thing. The framework of the show is focused around one element: live movie commentary. The kind of thing you would do while watching a film with friends, just riffing on the flick for fun.
That's my Nick, back from 2 months of army training, and you know what a man wants when he's been away for 2 months. No, what does he want?
Belly dancing lessons?
A lot of people are familiar with the term "so bad it's good," and this is what it refers to. A movie can be so shoddily put together that the end result is entertaining to watch, not as the experience of a film, but as a runtime of errors. I never necessarily linked "so bad it's good" with this idea, so I was always a little lost when people would describe things this way. There should be a word to differentiate it from real movies more cleanly, like Kino being good film, and then kitsch just being quote-unquote bad film, and then crap for the really bad stuff. But if I used any of these three words to describe the decoration around the framework of this show, it would absolutely be kitsch. The pilot to Mystery Science Theater 3000 looks more like this.
Do you think they can see us, Joel Hudson?
Yeah, Crow, the transmission light is on, isn't it?
Joel Hudson, it's the first
It's a bit colorful, more small, more personal than someone on stage, but positioned like a news presenter. Here we have our host, Joel Hodgson, using his real name in the pilot here. He's made all of this with the help of a small television station based out of Minneapolis. KTMA, or today known as WUCW, part of the CW, the mad scientists behind Catwoman, Archer, Kite Man, the superhero programming. But back in 1988, KTMA was just Channel 19, newly merged with a bunch of other local stations under the same umbrella and finding pleasure in taking big risks. Joel Hodgson pitched his show at just the right time, but it wasn't all coincidence. Jim Mallon, the head of KTMA at the time, would hear Joel Hodgson out not out of blind interest, but more of a careful investment. You see, Joel Hodgson had actually made a name for himself in comedy at the time. This was kind of the premier age for stand-up comedy. It's where a lot of the writers actually met one another. This was when acts like Jerry Seinfeld were just becoming somebodies on the scene. The arbiters of that influential scene watched Joel Hodgson's career with keen interest, and it eventually landed him an opportunity at stardom. NBC offered Hodgson a starring role in his own sitcom with co-host Michael J. Fox, with his creative input accepted but not always obliged. You may be sorry, what did you say? I said I didn't know how to make that bit connect. Bit connect? Bit connect? Bit connect! Unlike the people who invested in the worst version of a character creator possible, Joel Hodgson stood against the opportunity on principle. He recognized that with the carrot of stardom came the leash of protocol. He would be beholden to a creative overhead, and his voice would be minimized. That, to him, was not worth the trade, and so he refused the deal. He was put off by the whole thing, but he would leave Hollywood altogether after NBC came back with a second offer. Twice as much money, and no more creative freedom. With that, Hodgson realized they had no idea what they were really asking of him. They were too blinded by dollar signs. He saw the problem sewn into the industry, that creative expression wasn't actually valued, and so he skipped town for his home, the Twin Cities. He didn't come back to town just to hop on over to KTMA, however. For a while, he took a break and worked at a t-shirt factory applying appliques to t-shirts. Certainly a different scene than Late Night with David Letterman, but it was exactly what he was seeking. Searching for a spark, he knew he would produce some quirky enough train of thought if he allowed himself to just become utterly bored. And so again and again, he presses the fabric with the slogans and the mascots, one color and one pattern, pressed and lifted, moved in, moved out. The mind is wandering, and Hodgson remembers the image from a booklet in a jacket sleeve of an Elton John record he had back in high school. In it, the foreground is shadowed by the light of the background, a movie screen. In the front is a row of round back seats. Occupying two of the right-hand side are a couple enjoying the film. The image inspired a thought as Hodgson remembered a science fiction movie he was fond of, Silent Running. A man sabotages his space crew in order to protect a bunch of Earth's last trees on his ship and survives in it with a few playful robots. Well, in Joel's case, as he plays Joel Robinson on the show, not Joel Hodgson, his real name, a very clever disguise if you would ever take a peek behind the scenes like I do. His mission statement is not botanical repopulation, but instead as a test subject. A pair of mad scientists launch a company satellite while he's aboard. They sought to get this guy completely isolated from society while feeding him nothing but terrible movies. And as a kid, I thought that was a really terrifying idea, actually. It was like the Russian sleep experiment crossed with a B-movie night. Would his speech deteriorate over time as the audio quality becomes his only source of conversation? Would his mannerisms rigidly form to resemble those of decades-old media? Maybe the darker idea of isolation being explored in Silent Running was what inspired the creation of robot friends, Crow, T-Robot, and Beeper. Ideas get reworked and drafts get left behind. It looks like this was an early stage of the trio that was inspired a bit more by A New Hope, with Luke Skywalker, CP3O, and R2-D2, the beeping one. I think the iteration we all know with the host, Crow, Tom Servo, and occasionally the purple one is the better fit for the show. It just makes more sense, and it hasn't really been replicated ever since. I call her the purple one because she used to have a name that isn't very politically correct anymore, and so from now on I'll just be calling her by the updated name GPC. So, the host, Tom, Crow, GPC. And obviously I don't just say Joel here, I say the host, and that's because the host is variable as to who it is, believe it or not. Since the main element of the show is live movie commentary, the story around that doesn't really matter. It never interrupts or interacts with the main content. Again, live movie commentary, or called riffing by the show creators, and so I'll just let you know ahead of time, Joel Robinson eventually escapes the satellite. He actually does it on Season 5, Episode 12. But he gets replaced by a guy named Mike Nelson to fulfill his role on the satellite. Called the Satellite of Love, by the way, named after a Lou Reed song, because Joel Hodgson was a big music guy. Just so into, like, you know, music. But the switch from Joel to Michael J. Nelson actually caused a bit of strife between fans back in the day, apparently. I wasn't alive. But as a historical allusion, it was akin to the American Civil War, tearing families asunder. Brother versus brother, father eating son. As a cybernatural allusion, it was like when JonTron left Game Grumps. Or when Oni Plays left Game Grumps. Or when EDP left Game. So Mike Nelson replaces Joel Robinson after 5 seasons of the show. Mike's stint lasts him all the way into the 10th season and the movie. I grew up watching both halves of the show, so I'm neither here nor there on the debate between these two. I like both. But I do have some things to say about the Netflix revival because wasn't that into it. I guess that's what I have to say about that. I remember when the Kickstarter for it became the biggest ever on the platform back in 2015, 2016. It's still on the website, I think, is number 2 now. It's no longer the biggest, but the second biggest, just behind Critical Role, I believe. Just a bunch of nerd stuff, I suppose. The newest host as of Netflix's 11th and 12th seasons is named Jonah Heston, and I like him. I do. But there's a huge difference in the way the writing flows. It can come off so shotgun scattered that being hit by punchlines feels like getting needled by shrapnel shells. It's not really a series of laughs, but more of a punchline is kind of literally what it feels like. The energy of the Mike era is a bit more precise with the execution, or at least it has more patience in pulling the trigger, so maybe more like a Remington. Don't know why I've chosen the gun metaphor, but here we are. In this case, I guess then Joel is like the classic GoldenEye silenced pistol. I guess. The funny thing is that by referencing all these things, I'm inherently playing to an audience that's just older than I am. I was born in December of 1999, so like for 2 weeks of the year, I have to remember my age. But once New Year's hits, boom. I'm as old as the last 2 digits in the new year. I grew up during the days of No Child Left Behind, but I do not remember 9/11. Don't you dare ask me where I was, because all I can tell you is in a diaper. Do not talk to me about it. Leave me alone. Talk to me about Gangnam Style. I remember that. Or you know what? Talk to me about subscription services. And that's not a segue into advertisements, because I don't have those. No, I'm talking about the 13th season of Mystery Science Theater 3000, which is only available on the Gizmoplex subscription service, which I would get at some point, just to see the newest host, the purple-suited Emily Connor. But oh well, yeah, that's a different paywall. I don't feel like it. So I can tell you everything up to the 12th season. And the plot summarized for that is this. After building his robots and sharing his inventions with 2 mad scientists, Dr. Clayton Forrester and Dr. Lawrence Earnhardt, Joel Robinson watches kitsch film about once a week. As far as a few miscellaneous lines of dialogue can confirm something on that time scale. Dr. Clayton is played by the voice of Crow, Trace Ballou, and Dr. Earnhardt is played by Josh Elvis Weinstein, who mostly stayed behind the camera after his work on season 1. Maybe you'll appreciate another series that he worked on, a little show called Freaks and Geeks. He wrote with Judd Apatow on season 2 and helmed writing on the 15th episode, Moshing and Noshing. But after Dr. Earnhardt leaves, season 2 welcomes TV's Frank, played by Frank Conniff. This goes on until episode 12, season 5. Mitchell.
Who's the puffy guy who's the big blurry sex machine?
Mitchell.
That Mitchell is one fat.
Shut your mouth.
Just talking about Mitchell.
At this point, the show is picked up by Comedy Central, and the exchange behind the scenes was fraught with nerves. From the Washington Post, Hodgson is stepping down to do more work behind the camera, directing and writing after a brief hiatus. As the creator of Mystery Science, including the robots, he's earned a rest after Mike Nelson, the show's head writer, who steps up to a cult hit in its prime.
Television that doesn't insult your intelligence.
It's the Ozark Mom Daredevils taking out the laundry.
It's intellectual. It stimulates your mind, and you laugh the whole time.
Listen to me, good people of the city of Covasite. Consider Amway. I have heard there's a...
For us, it's like our Saturday Night Live, maybe. The early Saturday Night Live back in the 70s and everything else, that was the biting social commentary, the biting social humor. We get it now through old movies.
After Joel leaves, the new lineup is Mike Nelson, Crow T. Robot, Tom Servo, GPC, Dr. Clayton Forrester, and TV's Frank. Later, TV's Frank dies at the end of season 6. Spoiler. Season 7 and then the movie have Dr. Forrester being joined by his mother on occasion, Mrs. Pearl Forrester. Then Clayton dies in the movie, and season 8 starts with Pearl continuing the experiment. I'm telling you all this because I don't want you to watch the show for the sake of the story. The story doesn't matter. I'm giving you the stuff that you kind of skip past, honestly. This is all framework for live movie commentary, and there's a lot of funny stuff in there that we'll get to later. But first, we gotta cover the basics, right? But Dr. Clayton Forrester dying in the movie was a translation behind the scenes to Trace Ballou just wanting to get off camera, same as J. Elvis Weinstein before him, and then Bill Corbett took the place as Crow. It's the minor role shifts like this that really draw lines between fans, by the way, but I'm always up for reinterpretations. I don't mind when something's done new and fresh with a new take. Oh, what's 2021's film adaptation of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight doing over here? What is that? What is this thumbnail that I have? Am I working on a video like that? What? But even into the Netflix seasons, I'm fine with newer casts doing voices. I won't lie, as a kid, I kind of hoped that I would be able to do something like being a host on the satellite, and YouTube is kind of like that. Sorta. So hey, there you go. You inspired me, Joel Hodgson. Good job. Butterfly effect. You know what I'm saying? Pearl Forrester becomes the new main man. And after she grooms a man-like ape into complete loyalty and befriends one of the stupidest members of the most intelligent species in the universe, the series comes to a conclusion in Season 10, Episode 13, Diabolic. Mike and the bots are accidentally headed towards Earth thanks to a Radio Shack plug-and-play that Pearl Forrester is messing around with, accidentally drives them straight back to Earth, ending the experiment immediately, allowing them to escape. The trio of Dr. Pearl Forrester, Dr. Bobo the Gorilla, and Brain Guy, or as he prefers to be called, the Observer, all just kind of leave the castle that they were in. The evil castle that they occupied. They moved into an evil castle. There was a, proper headquarters for work that they were doing. Mike, Crow, and Tom all move in together and continue to make fun of bad movies on Mike's couch. And GPC starts up a Fortune 500 company that dominates the market before the Silicon Valley boom. And that was all of Mystery Science Theater 3000 from August of 1999 to April of 2017. So by the time it comes back around, technology has changed to the point where television is no longer the premier of home entertainment, and streaming is all the rage. We still use the software on our TVs, but the game has changed entirely. Perhaps due in part to Mystery Science and its legacy, the internet actually, as a staple, has live commentary and stream-based entertainment on lock. A standard of reaction content is already well established in very similar fashion to the classic riffing style, but with one key difference: pacing. Video production software is widely accessible to the public now, unlike the late 80s, and hardware like a camera and microphone are pre-built into the quasi-essential smart device. People make their own content now, and an audience of their peers determine their success. Over time, the platform goes from geeky and obscure to relevant and unavoidable, and everybody has a voice. That means two things. There's an audience for this revival, and there's competition that wasn't present previously. These conditions are, I'm guessing, what led to the impatient, saccharine tone of the revival, the 11th and 12th season. Too much, all at once, and yet strangely vacant, like the jumpsuit and puppets are only a skin for another property altogether. It feels off, but I don't always mind. It's different and takes some getting used to, but I return to the Avalanche episode somewhat frequently, so it has its highlights for certain. I mentioned that there was a 13th season, but I haven't seen it because it's behind a paywall I don't want to pay for. It's not Netflix, and I don't... No, my pockets. No.
Anyway, that's just about it. I love this show. I quote it all the time. I will very occasionally meet someone who will also watch the show, so I know it's not completely unheard of, but it's pretty obscure. The cult appeal, I think, comes in part from the strange presentation, but mostly just the writing. I remember the first time cracking open James Joyce's Ulysses and being met with the odd fumblings of Tom Servo's poetic brogue. It clicked for me right there that some obscure line from my childhood was actually referencing the opening lines to one of the longest pieces of English literature, and a work from James Joyce, no less. The subject material definitely catered to a certain audience, and the celebrity references date the show firmly in time, if not in space, but there won't be anything quite like it again, and it deserves the legacy it has as an influential cult classic. I give it an S rank for Satellite of Love.